because as I said, we've got daily change requests, daily. We had to manage to be efficient, deliver every week, present on the demo, and we had to think of a plan. How will this big team work in parallel?
What was the most challenging feature to develop?
The core part of the application was the most challenging. The application was a reservation system, something similar where you buy seats in airplanes. So when you buy an airplane ticket, the same way this application provided for their end users or customers or clients to reserve a rail car.
All right, today we're gonna talk about how to handle, as you said, client project, an enterprise level project that you called a client journey, all the way from if there's a product discovery to the end where you maintain the software, the product that you've developed. The project that we're going to talk about and use it as an example on other projects that are enterprise level is our US-based client that specializes in railway. We designed the software for railway for cargo management, and we're going to see, what was the client, what was the journey like, everything, from the start to the end. This was your biggest project to this day? Yes?
For sure.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll have bigger than this in my career, but we'll see.
Right. So what did you work on before that?
I started as a front-end engineer, basically front-end development. When I joined DECODE, I was a JavaScript engineer, and then I became a software engineering team lead, and I'm doing that today, leading people. Yes.
But the older you get, the more responsibilities you have.
Yeah.
All right. So we have, I think, 9 talking points that we decided that are, let's say, that's the points of this client journey. The first one is discovery. If the product discovery is needed, then you go through product discovery. What do you think? What's the most important step in product discovery? What helps you the most to see what you have to do in that project?
Well, the most important thing is to connect with the client, to understand their problem and their needs. You need to basically know every bit of the project, and you do that through product discovery. In this project, we were lucky that we were partnered with a big consulting firm from the US that did basically that. They understood every problem, every need of the client, and after that, the most important thing is to write it down. Let's say, simplify it like that. Write it down, and then pass it over to the development team that will develop the project. Yeah. So.
All right. So in our case, we already had the product discovery done, and now the first step, actually, from our side, was forming the team.
Yeah.
So what was the approach there? So first you had to have the technology, which was?
Yeah. So when you see the requirements that are the result of the product discovery, we then assess the situation, assess the scope of the project, and then we form our team. Concretely, in this project, we were using JavaScript Quarkus framework on the backend side. Front-end side was Angular framework. With that, we had 2 QA engineers. Mostly they've done manual testing, but we also automated some tests through Tosca. Tosca is a big corporate uh, testing UI framework. And yeah, also we had team lead on the project, Scrum Master, product owner, and that's it.
How big was the team?
I think 15 people, yeah.
And this team was mostly assembled from mid-level developers and senior developers.
Mostly senior developers. It's a challenging project, so we had most senior developers, some mid-level developers, yeah.
Okay.
And I would say that will be even harder to manage. How can you manage a senior developer and see that the senior developer is growing?
Hmm.
Yeah, that was also challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult to shape somebody a little bit different if they're already have their experience.
Yes.
Okay, now that you formed the team, then you had to define who are the stakeholders and how to communicate with everybody and with the stakeholders. One of those things are reports, demos, weekly meetings, and so on. So how did that go?
Yeah, so basically we had first initial meetings with them, Skype calls, Teams calls, where we introduced each other. We identify who was our, let's say, person of interest for our team in their organization. And then for the first part is the onboarding process. So each team member has to have, if it's a big corporate company, they have a lot of tools and um accounts that they are using for development, project management. Each developer and each person in the team had to have their personal email and registered to their domain. So that was the first step, getting the access into their corporation. After that, uh, our team was separate from their team. I mean, we built up the project, so only our team built up the project. So we set up our own processes, ceremonies, meetings. We've done agile development, Scrum-based agile development. So setting up the sprints, drafting out the tasks for developers, and planning through the requirements that we get from the product discovery. After that, we identified our product owners, stakeholders, as you said, that are basically owning the project on the higher levels. And then with that, we are setting up, we have to present our work somehow. And we do that through demos that we do weekly. So in a sprint, it's a two-week sprint. So every week we basically have a demo. What's our progress? We organize a call and demo through the application what we have done in the current sprint, what the stakeholders can expect at the end of the sprint. With that, when we have defined tasks, Jira tickets, or whatever, we also want to present the progress. So we draft up documents, spreadsheets, where we have a high-level perspective of the progress of the project that we then also present during the demos or in a separate weekly emails or something similar like that. Yeah.
All right, what would you say is the most challenging thing about demos? How do you assemble, something that's gonna present the results and your plans, let's say, very concise and effectively?
Since we are doing demos weekly, The most challenging thing is to have everything ready for the demo. It's a development process. So we in this first phase of development, we don't have let's say project living in production environment. It's not that stable project with incremental releases, incremental features, and bug fixes. We are building up a new project, so that's the most challenging thing, to organize all the planned tasks for each sprint to be ready to be presented to the clients. So each sprint we already have in advance planned scenarios, what will be developed for the demo. So let's say if we have to demo, we then organize the demo on to the end of the week, not Friday. Friday is read-only day. Let's say Thursday. We then plan to demo on Thursday. Yeah.
Or how long did they usually last? I mean, this is a big project, so sometimes if it's a small project, they go much quicker, but this...
Usually, in this kind of environment where there's a big corporate and business people, we always plan to keep it short and interesting. Presenting the UI is always a big win. So basically, that's it. The challenge is uh, to make everything happen for the demo. Yeah.
Okay, we mentioned onboarding. How did you approach that? And by that, I mean DevOps sync, just documentation. And you did mention a little bit that all the employees from our side had their emails from our client. They had their domain, of course, where they can be reached. But how did it actually go? And a little bit more in detail, the onboarding process.
So basically, those kind of big organizations have their standards and processes and documentation that usually get sent out to your emails, shared with you, and then you go through that and learn their way of doing developing. Basically, you go through the documents and then find the right owners, find the people that do DevOps, set up the projects. They are in charge of maybe the whole team, and then when we find that out, we contact the people through Teams. Of course, we have Teams for our main communication, or any kind of other tool. And then we communicate through chat, yeah. And then we set up our projects with their guidelines. In this kind of project, we were lucky enough that they had top-notch quality of setting up our environments. So everything was basically ready for us. They set up front end and back end. They pulled up their pipelines. They set up all the rules, all the specifics, and we had classic way 3 environments: development, staging, and production. And we were ready to go.
So it's great, you know, let's say if a company like that has everything set up so that there, if you're, let's say, integrating a team that's, if you're outsourcing a team, it's easier going to be for them just to practically plug in and just start.
Yeah.
Than for them to set up some things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, basically you plug and play. That's awesome because a lot of time is invested when you start up new projects into setting up the environments. That's the most challenging part.
How did it go with setting up the processes and standards and everything? And by that I mean setting up the Jira boards, GitHub, and everything else.
For that part was interesting. We only got an empty Jira board. We met up with the person that's dedicated for our team for managing the administrative part for the Jira. We presented DECODE way of working, our agile process. We presented our materials, and they just said, "Awesome, could use that." So basically, we set up the process in our DECODE agile way of development.
But we also, I think you mentioned that we also got plugged into the source CI/CD project
Yeah. So
processes. Yeah.
yeah. So basically, that's the part regarding the pipelines. So with all the documentation that you are reading of their standards, of their code quality, way of writing the code, that's all implemented in the pipelines that we had already. So we just had to follow the rules and then, let's say, push the code to the repos and see if everything is spinning. That's it.
After everything was set up, so you have a team, communication, you know how the way to communicate with the client. Now, and you have all the process stand up, development is ready to start. One of the things that was interesting with this project is that you had a tight timeline, which was about 3 months, so a lot of work in a short period of time. Um, how did that go? I know that it was a bit hectic. One of the thing that you mentioned that it was really important here was parallel development. So how did that go?
Uh, well, basically, we had to manage all the teams to work in parallel. So even though we got requirements for the project, there's always change in the design of the application. So basically, we had not weekly but daily change requests from the design, and we had to manage to be efficient, deliver every week, present on the demo, and we had to think of a plan. How will this big team work in parallel? So we did that. I'll start with the front end part. So since in the beginning of the project, when we got introduced the way that they had daily change requirements, we thought of an tool called Storybook, and we started to develop only the components that are being used in the application. So basically, if there's a page, we identify all the components and then we develop the components in the storybook. It's basically what it says, a storybook of the components, where you go through and you have everything ready or prepared for development and implementing into the page. So that was the front end part. The backend part was a little challenging. We decided to use a tool called API Dog, where the backend developers defined their, let's say, contracts. Contracts were the endpoints that were being used by the front end side. So that tool has the ability to mock some data. They have mock servers and mock understandable data, not like gibberish. So the backend developer could mock the data that's understandable to the front-end developers, and that's aligned with the requirements that we have to have in some specific features. So the whole process would go getting the change requests, getting the components, getting aligned with front end and the back end guys with the contracts. And when they are aligned, the development can start then, because then the front end developers would consume the endpoints that are mocked with understandable data. They can then connect everything into, let's say, a page that will show some data table with understandable data.
Would it be impossible without API dog? Because last week we had a whole presentation by our CDO, so I figured out that it's quite something that is important.
Yeah, it would be impossible, because then we would maybe wait, not maybe, but for sure, then the front end guys would wait for backend to be implemented, and then
And there was no time for that.
yeah, and you're already late. Yeah.
Right. You also mentioned before we started recording that QAs played an important role here, with just so they can start testing some tasks. So how did that go?
Yeah, the most important part also is that QA engineers are involved in the whole process as a third party from the sidelines. They observe everything. They have to understand the requirements. They have to understand the data. And then they have to understand the feature that's being built. And with that, they have to be aligned with the Jira tickets or the tasks that are presented to the developers, and then confirm the acceptance criteria that are written for the feature to be built. Because they are, let's say, our end user in development, they are our only safeguard between the end user, and everything has to be perfect to have it finished and to have that definition of done when the feature is done.
Now that you mentioned features, you also said that one of the important things about this project were feature flags. That you managed to handle some things that feature flags made them easier to handle.
Yeah, that's also one way of making the teams independent. Let's say you want to develop a feature that's dependent on the backend side, but the backend is not finished, and the front end UI part is finished, the design is finished, development ready. You don't want to keep waiting. You just wrap it with a feature flag, finish all the work, push it to production, and then that feature flag would switch between the let's say mocked data and then real data that's provided through the same endpoint in the application.
So feature flags are actually lifesavers?
Yes, yes.
Okay. In an ideal world, everything's ready. By that I mean design, everything's defined. But in this case, some things weren't defined. For some the parts of the projects, you only had wireframes. So how did that go?
We were really lucky that we had our designers free that could jump in and help us with that. So our designers jumped in and and have done that work. Basically, when something was missing, we didn't sit on our hands. We didn't wait for the requirements to be finished, to the design to be finished. We onboarded our designer to the design system that we were given, and then they just
And you said that you used storybooks also for that it made things easier.
Yeah,
So the backend could start working
yeah
on
yeah.
everything.
So basically, The designer would finish the design. We would then develop it in Storybook, check with the designer if everything is fine. We've covered all the states from the component or the page or something similar. And the work was done here.
What was the most challenging feature to develop? I know that we can, really mention it, but how how long did all right, so how long did it take you to develop the most challenging feature? We can have the question put that way.
Well, I would say the core part of the application was the most challenging. The application was a reservation system, something similar where you buy seats in airplanes. So when you buy an airplane ticket, the same way this application provided for their end users or customers or clients to reserve a car, rail car, and drive a unit to a terminal to be transported by train. So the most challenging part was really understanding
What's happening?
yeah, what's happening there. So it's a whole process of reserving your place on a rail car, getting to the terminal, getting in the terminal, and then when you're in the terminal, there's whole set of processes where your intermodal container goes through.
So there's a lot of things happening on the back end.
Yes, yes, a lot of events.
All right, so parallel development, a team assembled like this eventually helps you handle change requests better.
Yeah, basically makes you not agile, but extremely agile.
Extremely agile, which was really important here.
Yeah, because as I said, we've got daily change requests, daily.
Daily, okay. So now that the development was almost over, you went to our client to the United States, and you said that was one of the most important things of this client journey, that it's really, really a good thing to have your developers, QAs on site. So how did that go?
When you look at this, when you look at our application, the reservation system, and you look at their ecosystem of other applications, it's a microservice ecosystem. So our application was one of the microservices. We've integrated with a couple of other microservices that are being used to make that reservation system functional. So with that, we've organized an on-site integration testing. We've assembled a team with front-end, back-end, and front-end engineer, back-end engineer, and a QA engineer. And we went to the US. We've organized weekly integration testing where we all sat in one room and worked through the bugs or tested the application, reported the bugs, and then communicated them back to our EU-based or Croatian-based team that then handled the bugs and already had a new release ready for our start of the day and continued testing the other day.
So it was actually favorable that you had, what, a 6-hour difference?
Yes.
So they could work on some things and then prepare them for you?
Yes.
So you can just sort them out.
Yes, that's one other thing that I like to work more with the US-based clients because we are 6 hours before than
East Coast, if we're talking about.
yeah, East Coast than the other part of the world. Let's say Australia, it's
It's a little bit more
yeah.
difficult, yeah. How did you prioritize the bugs and the feedback? How did you? I know that again you're time constrained, but how did you set? Okay, we're gonna have to work first on this bug, and put that one in the backlog, probably with tens of others.
Yeah.
So how did you triage the bugs?
Basically, it was politics and reading the room, since there were a lot of teams from a lot of different, let's say, microservices that we were integrating with. You had to read the room and understand what was most prioritized. And then with that, we've presented our own prioritization list for our developers. And yeah, basically that was that, reading the room, politics, and power play between other teams in the room.
One would think that it wasn't power play or politics, that it was, let's say, pure reasoning, because
Yeah, of course.
let's say this bug is more important than the other one.
Yeah.
So that we're gonna solve that one first.
That's an exceptional one. That's another list.
That's an exceptional one. After that was done, the next step is that I think you're right that you're in now is just maintaining the product. You said you mentioned that you have release cadence, that's really important with the features. So how is that going?
So after the integration testing, we've entered a new phase, the production phase. And also, since it's a railway network, you have like hundreds of terminals on the East Coast. Um, the release phase to the production was not, let's release everything to all 100 terminals. We had a staged rollout. So we've picked a couple of terminals and then released it to production. Of course, versioning the project is really important. And we've set up a weekly cadence of releasing new features, fixes, bug fixes, change requests to a specific day in the week. Now, if we look at the sprint that I mentioned before, we didn't have any demos, and now we are completely focused on the client feedback, fixing the problems, and making the rolled stage out being really smooth.
All right, so it was important not to just let the floodgate open and release everything at once. By that I mean front end, back end, and just releasing everything, because it's going to make things more difficult. One of the things that I forgot to mention at the beginning of our recording is the Hello World project. What's that?
Yeah, so basically, when we had everything set up, we have our pipelines set up, we have our repos set up, and we have our requirements finished, and we want to go into development. We always suggest that our first sprint would be a Hello World project. That means that front-end guys set up their project with basic setup and basic components that is just run the application and it's running. And backend is also set up with most basic configuration. And then we deploy that to each environment, into development, into staging, and not production, but development and staging. And then we pull up the project and click through it. We see that everything is working. We get, for example, implement an endpoint on the backend that just returns hello world, and then integrate it with the front end. And then when everything is on, let's say, development environment, and you click on a button and you get the response from the server, that means that everything is working. So we're ready for deployments. We're ready for implementing new features, and that's the whole reason. Because with our past experience, most of the time uh, is used getting that done. So we don't do that at the end of the project. We do it at the beginning of the project.
So that was one of the key elements.
Yes.
Started developing everything.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm gonna call it step number 9, scaling the product. So, you can now actually, what you can do is after the whole, let's say, journey, you can onboard their team into ours and just show them how everything functions. So how did you approach that? It can be, it's actually reverse onboarding. So how did you handle that?
Well, in other projects, we are offering our services that when we finish the project, we have everything documented. We have our processes set up, also documented. We have a lot of documentation that we can hand over to their team, and then they can just be onboarded and take over the project, and we slowly move out of the project. In this situation, we got merged with different teams. So basically, we got merged with 2 other teams that were working on other microservices that were integrated into our service, and then we've onboarded them the same way, but we did not move from the project. We stayed there. We now cooperate. We work together, deliver new features, fix the bugs, and do our weekly release cadence.
How long did the onboarding last?
I would say 1 sprint.
One
Not
sprint?
long, yeah.
That's
Even
good.
even half of a sprint.
Half of a sprint.
Everything was done by their standards. We just introduced them with our standards, which are not something different. It's best practices for everything, from project management, development, and releasing, versioning of the project, and it was pretty quick. Yeah.
What's for you personally the most important thing in onboarding?
That would be that we have everything up to date and everything written, because when you have some documentation, our standards adjust to the project. Not every project is the same, so you have to adjust and
Be agile.
yeah, be agile. And then we all know that the biggest problem for a developer is updating the documentation. So
Nobody likes that.
yeah, that would be the biggest challenge for making the onboarding clean, let's say. When you get old documentation, let's say, and you just give it to the developers that had to be onboarded, and they get stuck on, like, say, step 4, and lose like half a day to figure out what's wrong instead of pinging somebody. That's wasted time for me.
Yeah, one of the, I think, podcasts we mentioned that sometimes developers have a problem with just asking something.
Yeah.
And instead they wait.
Yeah, it's a even bigger problem if you're a senior developer. You're not gonna ping someone, yeah, let's say a project manager to help you out with the documentation.
I don't know if there's anything more that I'd like to ask. Is there anything that you'd like to mention, or just you can wrap it up?
Well, I would say that I'm really happy for the opportunity to work on this project. I think I learned a lot, but by a lot I mean times 10. Um, and yeah, as I said at the beginning, I don't think I'm going to have a similar project in my career. I hope so. But yeah, it was one of the biggest project that I ever.
What's the biggest thing that you learned? A big question, I know.
I would say people management. That's always a challenge, but that's a whole other level on this kind of project. Yeah.
Micromanagement. Yeah, 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 yeah. You had to do it a lot because it is what it is. All right, that's pretty much it. Thanks for clarifying some things, and yeah,
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sven. I'm also honored for being invited in this famous podcast.
in the same meeting room that as I said in the beginning, you spend every day a couple hours.
Yes.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much.